What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another episode of the NBA preview. Now, as always, people, if you missed the last episode, there will be your annotation in the top right hand corner, a link in the description, and if you watch the video in its entirety, there will be an annotation at the end of the video for the last episode, as well as an annotation for a playlist to all of the episodes in the NBA preview, so you can binge watch and catch up. But in today's video, we are talking about the Detroit Pistons and why they will be the most disappointing team in the NBA this next upcoming season. Because for whatever reason, people tend to believe that Detroit Pistons, they are playoff bound. They are a team that's going to make the playoffs and push it deep into the Eastern Conference, and they're going to surprise a lot of people. But let me just tell you right off the bat, in my opinion, Detroit, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. Unfortunately, I bought it last year because I bought a lot of stock in Detroit, but unfortunately, it plummeted in value. Detroit Pistons last year was the most disappointing team in my opinion, even though I've kind of gone back and forth with a few other teams. But just looking at the potential on the roster, the direction that they're heading in, and it's all just confusing to me. And I understand there were some injuries, I understand some circumstances occurred, but at the end of the day, the fact that some of these players are already plateauing when it comes to their talent level and their growth, or some are even regressing, is really concerning. And quite honestly, I just don't believe that they're going to make the playoffs, and they might end up disappointing a lot of people. And actually, with that being said, that's a great transition to our clip of the day for our summer of social media.
What's the Reggie Jackson status? I know you told me, I think it was early this month, that no tour days, but he can at least practice one time a day.
No, and we're just trying to decide, which practice and how much and how to bring him along. I think he would agree, but you can ask him that, really the biggest issue right now is conditioning. As you would expect, he's in the shape of someone who hasn't played in 6 months. So
this right here is going to be a pretty big reason why I believe that the Detroit Pistons might not make the playoffs at all this next upcoming season. For those who are unaware, last year Reggie Jackson only played 50-some games, unfortunately due to him suffering from tendonitis. And just like Stan Van Gundy said in that video right there, he hasn't played basketball in 6 months. He's been off to the side rehabbing, and unfortunately, I don't really see how this is going to get better for multiple reasons. One, for people out there who don't know, there's no real cure for tendonitis. It's something that just lingers around. And on some days, it's really bad, and other days, you just don't feel it at all. The problem with tendonitis, though, especially when it comes to NBA players, what triggers it is repetitive motion and exercise within a certain body part that you actually have tendonitis, and that's basically every practice, workout, exercise that NBA players do, especially when it comes to trying to correct the shooting form or just trying to lift weights. Another reason why this is going to be a huge hit for the Detroit Pistons is because of their playing style. Not necessarily saying that Reggie Jackson is the best player or the second best player on this team, but he's definitely one of the more important players on the roster because the way that Stan Van Gundy coaches the team. The relationship between the point guard and the center is very important in the Detroit Pistons offensive scheme, and having Reggie Jackson sidelined for over 6 months, and now we're at a point where he's only really been conditioning, which more likely means that he has not gotten better over the last couple of months, is really concerning. And that's actually probably the biggest part of this that I think a lot of people are overlooking. Reggie Jackson hasn't played basketball for 6 months, let alone attempt to play it at an elite level, which means that again he has to get back to conditioning and get back into his routines, but it also means that he hasn't even gotten better as an individual player. So we're talking about, at best, he will be where he was 2 years ago, which means that he's more likely just going to plateau. I could be wrong because, again, tendonitis tends to come and go, but who necessarily knows what's going to happen to Reggie Jackson this next upcoming season. And actually, speaking of Reggie Jackson and the bench depth at the point guard position, that's a great transition to our depth chart. Now, before we get to the depth chart, let's briefly look at these contracts as well. Not too much movement going on. When it comes to the new signings, Langston Galloway with a 3-year, $21 million contract, Reggie Bullock with a 2-year, $5 million contract, and then after that, a whole bunch of 1-year deals. I know a lot of people want to point out the fact that Eric Moreland signed a 3-year deal. However, none of his years are guaranteed outside of the first year, and even his first year is only guaranteed for the first 6 months of the regular season. So there's a possibility he's not even going to make it throughout the entire season, so keep that in mind as well. Then when it comes to overpaid players, you have Andre Drummond. I've had a back and forth with a few people saying that Andre Drummond is overpaid, $23 million a year for his type of productivity, especially since he's plateaued over the last 2 seasons. To some people, that definitely is overpaid for a player such as Andre Drummond. And then when it comes to expiring contracts, we have Stanley Johnson, Anthony Tolliver, and then Avery Bradley. Now with that being said, let's actually transition over to our depth chart. In the backcourt, we have Reggie Jackson and Avery Bradley. At the 3, Stanley Johnson. At the 4, we have Tobias Harris, and at the 5, we have Andre Drummond. On the bench, it's looking really suspect. Ish Smith, Reggie Bullock, and Anthony Tolliver, I guess, are the 3 players that I would like to point out, but it's a whole bunch of suspect players. I know people want to point out Luke Kennard, but I don't necessarily know how he's going to favor in this NBA season, man, because he's a rookie, and I'm not really sold on him either. And what's also very concerning with this lineup is the forward position. When it comes to Stanley Johnson, there's no proof at all that he can actually start in the NBA. And even if they want to go with a different lineup, bring in Tolliver in the starting position at the power forward spot, and then slide back Tobias Harris to the 3, there's still no way around the fact that Stanley Johnson will have to play more minutes this next upcoming season because they've lost so much depth on the perimeter and they lost depth at the forward position. So I don't necessarily know how that's going to favor. And obviously, like I stated before, with Reggie Jackson, outside of Reggie Jackson, we're talking about Langston Galloway or Ish Smith. Again, I don't know how people can casually say that this team is going to make the playoffs, but it is what it is. But when it comes to our spotlight player today, I have to take the time out and talk about my man Andre Drummond because I'm really concerned about you, man. Andre Drummond is a 6'11" big man who has spent his entire 5-year career with the Detroit Pistons. 2 years ago, he impressed a lot of people, including myself, with his first All-Star selection and posting up numbers such as 16 points and led the league in rebounds with 15 a game, and also grabbing nearly 5 offensive boards a game as well, which is phenomenal and also historic as well. So from that moment on, a lot of people, including myself, we bought a lot of stock in Andre Drummond and assumed that he was going to get better because he was in his early 20s. He got his contract, got paid, definitely not hating, but then to bounce back and plateau, many people would argue regress, is definitely concerning. Last year, he averaged less than 14 points a game, grabbed around 14 rebounds, which is something that he's going to do all the time. But when it comes to the defensive end, his blocks went down. And also when it just came to his overall athletic ability, especially crashing in the lane and drawing fouls, that went down as well, which is something that's really concerning. Only attempting 4 free throws a game for a player that should be the star focal point of any offense in today's NBA, or at least that's the potential that a lot of people saw in him. Now, don't get me wrong, he doesn't have to crash the rim all the time because I understand he is historically one of the worst free throw shooters ever, so I get that part. But it just got to the point where it was almost as if Andre Drummond was timid. His numbers got cut pretty significantly because he couldn't play deep into the 4th quarter due to the opposing team just hacking him and sending him to the free throw line. His confidence seems as if it's dipped, his athleticism appears to have peaked, and he's just not the player that a lot of people suspected him to be. And also understand with Reggie Jackson being in and out of the lineup, suffering from injuries, that definitely didn't help Andre Drummond in his productivity because at the end of the day, he needs someone to throw him the lobs and space the floor out for him, so I get that. But let's not forget the type of player that we were comparing Andre Drummond to. Not to say that everyone assumed that he was going to be the next quote-unquote Dwight Howard, but there were a lot of people who were drawing those comparisons. Obviously with Stan Van Gundy on the bench as a head coach, the system that was set around him, pick and roll, throw the lob, athletic big who dominates the boards, but he's just not the same player. So Andre Drummond, I hope this isn't all that you can show us. I hope that you can get better. But Andre Drummond, you're not really showing me much of anything. You're not as athletic as a DeAndre Jordan. You're not as great as a defender as Rudy Gobert. And so if the only thing that you're on the floor to do is grab rebounds at a historic rate, don't get me wrong, it's really impressive. But if you're supposed to be the focal point of the offense, you have to do better. Now, with that being said, that leads us to our Twitter question of the day. Shout out to my man SDC, aka Zach Lee, and he asked, I'ma flame you. Matter of fact, it's not even a question. You just saying this, but I'ma flame you if you say the Pistons aren't making the playoffs. better get your s'mores ready, Zach Lee. Better get your fire started. You better get the coals burning. You better get your match ready, because your Pistons they're not making the playoffs. Now, before I explain, let me say this. I don't know how we got to a point where the Pistons are a quote-unquote no-brainer to make the playoffs. But let me break it down to you like this. They're not better than Cleveland, not better than Boston, Toronto, not better than Washington, Milwaukee, and in my opinion, they're definitely not better than Miami. So that's 6 teams. The other 2 teams is Philly and Charlotte. Now, when it comes to Philly, there's definitely some question marks there, and that's the reason why I'm hesitant to jump to those conclusions. So I understand why a lot of people don't want to jump to those conclusions, but in my opinion, right now, as everything stands and being optimistic with players' health and their productivity, I think they're better. Now, when it comes to Charlotte, I don't see how you think that they're better than Charlotte either. Kemba Walker is better than Reggie Jackson. Andre Drummond, unfortunately, is basically the same thing that Dwight Howard is right now, and Dwight Howard is washed, which is crazy to me. Avery Bradley's probably the best third option on both teams, so I'll give you that. However, the Charlotte Hornets have Nicholas Batum and Marvin Williams. I like both of those players. And y'all have J. Cole playing at the power forward position. I'm just playing. I like J. Cole. I like my man Tobias Harris, aka J. Cole. I like him. Y'all got D Brown on y'all bench, so you know y'all trash. Then y'all got Anthony Tolliver, who might have to be the starter for the team because Stanley Johnson is not a starter. Let's just be honest, he should be in the D League, but y'all don't really have any other choice but to start him. And then also, let's not forget the fact that Drummond is so trash in the 4th quarter because he just doesn't even want to go to the free throw line. They had to put him on the bench. He played less than 30 minutes last year. As a star player, played less than 30 minutes. That's how trash he was in the 4th quarter. So they have to put out John Lure? Who else? Yeah, Boban Marjanovic? Come on, SEC. Your team trash. You know your team trash. So let's not even act like you don't know your team trash. Come on. You really don't even like the fact that you're a Detroit Pistons fan. Come on. Let's not even front. So I don't want to see you say stuff like this right here in your videos.
While I watch my Pistons beat your favorite team on our way to becoming the 2018 World Champions. Boy, if you don't get
the Seattle Supersonics, they got a better chance of making the playoffs. The 3-headed monsters, you know that team that plays in the Big 3 league, they got a better chance. You know you go to sleep praying and hoping that Stanley Johnson can play like Shammy Wells. Praying and hoping that Reggie Jackson can play like Jackson Ellis. I know you do that, bro. Yo, with all that being said, because I know SEC gonna be upset when you see this stuff. Shout out to everybody watching the video. Leave a comment in the comment section below, especially if you want to guess who the next team is gonna be. But with all that being said, people, I will see you all. I guess tell me what you also think about the Detroit Pistons. I really don't care though. But with all that being said, though, make sure you come back tomorrow for the next episode of the NBA preview. Peace.